During the first few years of crypto, a lot of incredible innovations happened, and every time they entirely flipped the script. But lately, that phenomenon somehow slowed down and faded out. Cryptocurrencies keep getting improved, of course, but somehow those improvements have been less mind-blowing after Ethereum's birth. Naturally, two questions come to mind. The first is just why? And the second is, will there be something else that blows our minds like Ethereum again one of these days? So we'll start this video by studying the why, and once that's done, I can tell you more about what's coming next. To understand why recent improvements have been less impressive, although they are impressive in their own ways, we have to think about what each crypto generation can do, the service their users benefit from in a way. How can we call it? When we look at Bitcoin from this angle, the service that it provides can be called scriptable settlement. In other words, it is a programmable currency used to settle transactions, but it's only programmable with an extremely simple programming language, which is called a script, unlike full-fledged programming languages like Solidity. With that script, very few features are offered other than the most basic payment-related ones. You can't really do anything other than payment on the Bitcoin network and its various forks, or at least it's extremely difficult to do something else since those networks are not designed for that. Of course, there have been attempts to venture beyond those limits with things like colored coins, which made it possible to have something that almost looked like ERC20 tokens on the Bitcoin network. But those were highly impractical and only compatible with the few Bitcoin nodes that specifically chose to implement them. Colored coins never became a part of the Bitcoin protocol, and they were quickly replaced by tokens. Fungible and non-fungible tokens were born thanks to what can be described as the second generation of cryptocurrencies. The first was obviously Ethereum. With an application layer that was separated from the rest of the protocol and turned into a virtual machine, Ethereum was the first cryptocurrency that offered a programmable settlement function instead of scriptable settlement function. Indeed, Ethereum uses a Turing-complete programming language. This means that it is a programming language that allows users to do just about anything they want, within reason of course. There are both theoretical and very practical limits, mostly due to the network's decentralized nature, but compared to a simple script, it's night and day. And in any case, with this system, at least we had truly programmable currencies, unlike Bitcoin, which was only scriptable, so it was a huge step forward. After Ethereum's birth, cryptocurrencies kept evolving, but the evolutions that came afterwards were, in a way, less important. Whether it was Cosmos, Avalanche, Polkadot or any other project like them, they all simply improved the programmable settlement model. Sure, the consensus mechanism changed, they have better cross-chain capabilities, and then what? It's still the same old programmable settlement system. That part didn't change one bit. Of course, these chains are much faster and cheaper, and that's a nice change of pace after having to suffer from Ethereum's issues for years, but there's nothing more to it. Whether we're talking about Ethereum or one of its successors, the concept is the same. It works well and you can do almost anything with it, but the protocol itself only contains the bare minimum. It's only functional and nothing more than that. These protocols exclusively rely on decentralized applications to add functions to the network. And that could have been just fine if the network was only targeting machines and developers, but that's not what crypto is supposed to be. Crypto originally was made for humans, and should it replace fiat currencies one day, it will need to cater to humans who aren't developers as well. And a purely functional network isn't appealing to them when they're already used to systems based on fiat currencies. People don't want a bare-bones virtual machine, they want a network that lets them do everything they can do with fiat currencies or other more complex forms of coordination. So, for crypto to truly take another step forward and give birth to a real third generation, programmable settlement systems need to become more than functional. They need additional features so that the final package looks more like what the public is looking for. Of course, you can't just add any random feature you can think about, otherwise the protocol would get bloated for no good reason. Therefore, these features should not be specific to a single narrow use case, and they should be important enough to justify integrating them directly into the protocol rather than using a dedicated application. When we keep that in mind, we quickly get four answers: automated and universal counterparty discovery, customized user requests and automated solving, privacy, and cross-chain asset transfers. And if you don't know what counterparty discovery is, it's just a fancy name for a mechanism that lets us find people whose desires match. For example, buyers and sellers. or companies and independent contractors. It can be any 2 or more people, as long as there is someone who wants something and someone else who can give them what they need. Now let's go back to those 4 functions I've talked about. It's not exactly obvious why they matter at a first glance, so I'll explain why right now. Firstly, let's talk about buying and selling assets, which is a currency's main use case no matter what. It also matters a lot in crypto since trading represents a large part of the activity, but modern cryptocurrencies solely rely on decentralized applications for that. Does it make sense? Not really. And it has a lot of downsides too when you compare it to what you can do with fiat-based systems. With fiat money, if you want to sell something but not necessarily immediately, the process is quite simple. You go visit a website like Craigslist and eBay, or you do a yard sale for example. And you pick a price and you just wait for a buyer to come. In crypto, on a decentralized exchange, none of that is possible. The buyer will never just show up. You have to go through the exchange's counterparty discovery mechanism to find a buyer. And on top of that, you must stay within the boundaries defined by the application's creators. If there is a feature that is missing, you can't do anything about it other than looking for another application. What's most problematic in this context is that you will only be able to close the sale if the buyer uses the same platform. This is because the existing chains do not have a universal counterparty discovery mechanism. Instead, this work is carried out by each exchange platform completely separately from other exchange platforms on the same network. This in itself doesn't look like a major issue. After all, it's still good enough for all of us, right? It works. Yeah, but actually not really. When someone's forced to use a specific application to find a buyer, the amount of options becomes smaller since among all the potential buyers that exist, only those who are using the same application can be seen by the seller. There could be other interested buyers who do not use the same application and who will never be able to get in touch with him. The seller will therefore not necessarily get best conditions for his sale just because he wasn't lucky enough to find a buyer offering a better price who is using another app. Sometimes he doesn't even find a suitable buyer at all and just gives up on the sale even though there are buyers, but they just aren't using the same application. So the trading volume is much lower than it could be. The losses are huge because this feature is entirely absent from traditional cryptocurrencies. And it's just the first problem on the list, remember. Existing chains also lack request customization, which is something that most everyone needs at some point. This lack of customization derives from the fact that on these chains, all existing complex systems are solely based on applications. As a consequence, it is not possible in practice to publish a transaction that represents more than just a direct interaction with a single application. And yes, I know there are a handful of exceptions like flash loans, but let's not pretend that's what I mean. The point is that we are in this situation where you can't create a complex transaction because there is no universal standard for writing transactions, no rules that all applications in the same category can understand. Each application is designed with its own rules. Because of this, one cannot easily create a transaction that can be understood by 2 different applications at the same time, and even less so if they have specific requirements. For example, it is impossible to publish a buy order for an NFT on OpenSea that is only valid if you manage to sell a certain amount of Ethereum at a certain price on Uniswap at the same time. Such a thing is only theoretically possible if someone creates an application that is specifically designed to interact with both OpenSea and Uniswap for such cases. But in order to use it, you will probably have to transfer your funds to another address controlled by the application and risk losing your money if the application gets hacked. In theory, it's far from ideal, and in practice, this application does not exist. This is why, in order to satisfy the needs of the general public in all situations, crypto networks will have to implement a request customization system. Now let's move on to the third missing feature on modern chains: privacy protection. This is completely absent from the Ethereum protocol and also from all of its successors. Addresses and their contents are all public forever. Once again, those networks solely rely on dedicated applications such as Tornado Cash to offer these features somehow. But it's far from enough since those applications' websites can be shut down and their users' addresses can be blacklisted, as we've seen recently with Tornado Cash being seized by the US government. The application still exists on the blockchain, but it's now basically inaccessible to all the less tech-savvy users. And on top of that, even when it was available, using it was very costly. So it's pretty clear that we can't rely on dedicated applications to get the job done. Privacy needs to be implemented at the protocol level. Now the problem here is that none of the existing privacy-focused chains really fit the user's needs. Most privacy chains like Monero are not programmable, and their usefulness is therefore very limited because they don't have decentralized finance apps or anything like that. As for the very few programmable privacy chains, so far they've all had some issues, although the issues aren't the same for all chains. This is all very embarrassing because privacy probably is the most important thing in a financial network that claims to replace central bank currencies. Think about it for a bit. How can anything work in your everyday life if everything is public? What would you do if your employer, your family, and everyone you've ever known or even just met once could see what you do with your salary? How could large companies operate if each of them could monitor what all the others do? How could governments function if all other countries in the world could see exactly how public money was being spent, especially on defense? A total lack of privacy in a financial network simply is a complete nightmare at all levels, no matter how you look at it. Therefore, in order to satisfy the general public, cryptocurrency must protect privacy at least as well as cash money does. Lastly, after the privacy issue, there is one thing left that's very important in the eyes of the general public, and that is cross-chain asset transfers. Users need to be able to exchange value between networks without it being inconvenient in any way. An example of a similar situation that can be experienced in our daily lives is paying with a credit card in a foreign country that does not use the same currency. If a European goes to the United States, they can pay a local shopkeeper with their card because their euros are automatically swapped with dollars. Users don't have to do anything and it just happens. And this is something that should also be true in the crypto world. Cross-chain exchanges must be so easy that they become invisible to users. Now that you know what all these four problems mean exactly, you also certainly understand that crypto will have a very difficult time moving forward and giving birth to a true third generation without solving them all. Because if those problems aren't solved, people just won't bother with crypto and will keep using central bank currencies. And that is where the Anoma project comes in. Anoma is designed to solve all four issues that plague the existing cryptocurrencies, and here's how it's going to do that. Regarding both counterparty discovery and request customization, Anoma will use a system no other cryptocurrency uses at the moment. On that network, the smallest unit won't be a transaction but something called intents. They are simple bits of code that represent a person's desires. There will be a dedicated chain-agnostic communication layer that's used only to communicate intents, which will allow network nodes to automatically match people's desires and create transactions that fulfill several users' needs at the same time. They will use intents as the default building blocks, and with that system, one transaction can be made out of several intents that fulfill each other. Of course, if they want to, users will still be able to publish transactions that directly interact with an app without going through the whole system. It'll just be an additional and very useful tool. And it's not just based on intents, there will also be something called validity predicates that also help users decide what they want to happen. But if you really want to know more, it's probably best if you go visit the Anoma website and read all the existing documents and articles. For now, what matters is that it is both an automated, universal and cross-chain counterparty discovery system as well as a request customization system, therefore solving 2 out of the 4 problems I've explained earlier. After those, there was the privacy issue. On Anoma, there will be a basic but efficient system for that called MASP, the Multi-Asset Shielded Pool, which lets you store assets and trade them privately. I'm not going to explain how it works now, but it's got a dedicated website so you can read more about it whenever you want. That being said, with that system, Anoma will not be protecting privacy quite as well as Monero does, for example, but it will still offer a decent way to shield your assets from prying eyes if you so desire. Lastly, in order to solve the cross-chain asset transfer problem, Anoma uses the IBC protocol, which lets users send assets between any 2 chains as long as both chains use the IBC protocol. Originally, it was created for Cosmos-based chains, and I have to say, Cosmos and IBC's creators were headed in the right direction. They offered the entire crypto space a truly next-generation system. Unfortunately, they didn't solve the other 3 issues I've mentioned, so Cosmos is still closer to the 2nd generation of protocols than the 3rd generation, which Anoma hopes to spearhead. Indeed, If we look back at the existing cryptocurrencies, we've had scriptable settlements and then programmable settlements, which you now know lack many things, and so the true next generation can only be one that will solve all the existing issues. It's not enough to just solve one out of 4 problems. However, it's pretty difficult to find a way to name that third generation. So far, Anoma's creators describe it as a generation of intent-centric, privacy-preserving protocols for decentralized counterparty discovery, solving and multi-chain atomic settlement. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, as you can see. Anyway, the concept is that it's a programmable settlement system, but with so many fundamental improvements baked into it that it truly fits what a human being really needs to exchange value. Ease of use, privacy, customization of requests, and automated solving. These are essential for an average user to be satisfied, and we can't rely on applications to make that happen. These all must be directly integrated into the protocol. In the end, it truly is a programmable settlement system that is designed to meet the basic needs of human beings. And that is why it could be called a humanized programmable settlement system. You probably remember it too. People used to talk a lot about the Internet of Things a few years ago. And many second-generation crypto networks are perfectly suitable for machines. IOTA, for example, had incorporated this idea into its branding. It would be the best crypto network for self-driving cars, smart fridges, etc. But until now, no one had advertised they'd be creating a product designed to meet the needs of average human beings. And that's exactly what Anoma is doing. It's all about terraforming the crypto space and making it suitable for humans. Now you might think, in theory that's great, but in practice, will it really be better? Will Anoma truly achieve all that? As of today, I cannot say yes with absolute certainty since I couldn't use the network myself so far. But fortunately for us, we'll be able to try it in a short while since the Namada testnet is coming soon. And since you probably don't know what Namada is, I'll explain. Here's the short version. It will be both the first Anoma instance, therefore the first chain that's part of the Anoma ecosystem, and also the first functional version of the protocol. We won't quite get everything Anoma set out to offer because Namada is designed with 2 very specific goals in mind. On one hand, it is designed to study and facilitate the implementation of connected fractal instances. And on the other hand, it is designed to test the MASP system, which allows users to store and exchange any assets in a completely anonymous way. Other than the MASP system, here's what Namada will have to offer. Validity predicates, which are one of the ways users can express their desires. The Tendermint consensus engine, which you probably know what it is. A proof-of-stake mechanism based on the one Cosmos uses, an IPC integration and a two-way bridge with the Ethereum network in order to facilitate asset transfers, and of course a wallet and block explorer. The network will have a token called NAM, which will be inflationary. It will be possible to get rewarded in NAM by setting up a network node and producing blocks, by staking tokens, by using a shielded pool, or eventually in other ways that have not yet been specified. Of course, one question remains. When? Well, sorry, I don't know, but it should be very soon. At the time I'm recording this, there is no fixed date, but it will be announced in the following days or weeks. And what is very interesting is that we will all have the opportunity to participate in the network setup ceremony, which is called a trusted setup. Since Anoma and Namada are based on a zk-SNARK system, when creating the network, people need to come together and use random numbers to help secure the system. This process, which is called Powers of Tau, is very well designed. Firstly, because there's an almost unlimited number of participants, and secondly, because it only takes one person who did things right for the ceremony to be successful. And the more participants there are, the less probable it is that all participants will be malicious. On top of that, joining the ceremony will be relatively easy, and if you want to try Namada or Anoma one of these days, it's best to attend the ceremony and personally make sure the network is built on solid foundations. So what I'd like you to do now is to go to the namada.net website, click on that button and give them your email address. In order to participate, you don't need much except some elbow grease, maybe the community's help, which you can get on their Discord server, and a computer with a modern mid-range CPU. And when the trusted setup is over, you might be rewarded with NAM tokens. So whenever the announcement happens, I hope I'll see you again in the trusted setups list of participants. Now I have to get ready for it myself, so I'll be going and I wish you a very nice day.